Welcome to the Podkey summary of Learn CSS Grid Lanes from WWDC 2026. There's a genuinely interesting new CSS layout idea on the table right now, and it's called grid lanes. It comes from the Safari team, and the big promise is simple: masonry-style layouts, the brick wall kind people usually reach for JavaScript to build, done natively in CSS. The details are where it gets useful. Because this isn't just a visual trick, it changes how items flow, how developers control column spans, and how they think about accessibility and debugging. Grid Lanes adds a new display mode called Grid Lanes, available in Safari 26.4 and sitting behind a flag in other browsers for now. The easiest way to picture it is as a layout that works along one main axis, but automatically spreads items across multiple lanes. So instead of everything lining up into neat rows with awkward holes, content packs itself tightly into a staggered layout that follows the shape of the items. If you've ever wanted a Pinterest-style wall without duct taping together floats, Flexbox workarounds, or a JavaScript library from 2017, this is the part that gets your attention. What makes this interesting is that it sits somewhere between Flexbox and traditional grid. Flexbox is great when you want a single-axis flow, but it doesn't naturally do that shortest column packing behavior people want for masonry. Regular grid gives you a two-dimensional matrix, which is powerful, but once your items have different heights or aspect ratios, you can end up with those annoying empty gaps. Grid lanes keeps the familiar grid syntax, but it leaves the perpendicular axis more open, so each new item can drop into the shortest available column instead. That means the browser preserves natural content sizes without stretching, cropping, or forcing overflow just to make the math look tidy. One of the smarter details here is something called flow tolerance. By default, it's 1em, and it relaxes the strict shortest column rule just a little. So if one column is only slightly taller than another, the browser is allowed to place the next item there, instead of obsessively picking the mathematically shortest one every time. That sounds minor, but it helps smooth out weird visual flips where items jump into an adjacent column, even though the height difference is tiny. In other words, the layout gets a little common sense, which is rare enough in web design to deserve a moment of appreciation. That same placement logic has an accessibility angle developers really can't ignore. If items are placed purely by column height, the visual order on screen can drift away from the DOM order underneath. For screen readers or keyboard navigation, that can get confusing fast, because tab order may no longer match what a sighted user thinks is the next item. The fixes are pretty practical. Adjust flow tolerance so the layout stays more visually consistent, or reorder the markup when needed, so the source order matches the intended reading order. It's a good reminder that a layout looking clever is not the same thing as it being clear to navigate. Grid lanes keep some of the control people already know from grid. You can still do things like grid column, span 2, or place an item from column 2 and have it span 2 tracks. So wider cards, featured items, and asymmetrical compositions are all still on the table. What you can't do is directly pin row placement, because rows are assigned by the algorithm. That limitation is part of the deal. The automatic flow is the whole point. So you get less micromanagement in exchange for a layout that packs itself. Responsive behavior looks pretty friendly too. A pattern like repeat, autofill, min-max press 200 peaks, 1fr lets the browser create as many columns as fit while keeping each one at least 200 pixels wide. You can also mix fixed and flexible tracks, like 1fr, 2fr, 1fr, if you want a more intentionally uneven layout. And if you want to get fancy, grid lanes can nest inside itself, including with subgrid for the column template. A regular grid can live inside a grid lane's parent, and a grid lane section can live inside a regular grid. So it plays well with the existing layout toolbox, instead of demanding a whole new mental model. Right now, native support starts with Safari 26.4, and other browsers have it behind experimental flags. So this is still early adopter territory. It's real, but it's not the kind of thing you can count on everywhere without checking support first. Safari's web inspector does make experimentation easier, though. It can draw the column and row lines, show order numbers on items, and visualize gaps directly in the layout. That means when something lands in a place you didn't expect, you can actually see whether flow tolerance or content size is driving the decision, instead of just staring at your CSS and muttering at it. WebKit also has a field guide and interactive demos, which is helpful because new layout tools always make more sense once you can poke at them. Grid lanes feels like one of those features that could quietly remove a lot of old front-end hassle if browser support catches up. It gives developers a cleaner way to build dense, flexible layouts, but it also asks them to think carefully about order, accessibility, and how much control they really need. For now, it's a very good thing to keep an eye on, and maybe a very good excuse to open Safari on purpose. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.